Welcome to Chapter 3 of Stress Management for Sports Science or Exercise Science and the Sports Medicine students. Let me share my screen and we will get started. There it goes. All right. So, science of stress. So the science of stress, discovering what actually happens in your body and your mind will help you understand the mechanics behind the stress prevention and stress reduction skills. Knowledge of the science and theory of stress provides strong, credible support for why and how stress management technique works. Okay, so again, you hear a lot of different techniques on how to prevent stress or manage stress or deal with stress. You know, people give you their opinions. This is what I do. This is what somebody else I know does. And again, some things work, some things don't, but there's an actual science that goes behind why, if you go visit a health expert, what they may tell you to do. Hopefully they're using the science and not some home remedy or something that one of their cousins, sisters, aunts, brothers used to do. Okay. So stress in the big bear. Why do we feel stress? What is its purpose? Consider being out in the woods and encountering a large hungry bear. After you recognize that the bear can harm you, what do you do? Do you run or do you stay and try to fight it off, right? So again, when you're thinking of stress, you can either try to run away from it, you can try to avoid it, or you can deal with it. So men and meat. Images of cooked meat make men calmer and less aggressive. All right. Again, maybe that's why I don't know if sometimes portrayed on TV, you see folks that are on diets, especially when they're not allowed to eat meat, they seem a little mad and aggressive. Maybe that's what it is. Those are my vegan and vegetarian friends. I don't know, how you deal with it, but again, apparently this is science. I'm just kidding. Fight or flight response. Proposed by Walter Ken, described the body's automatic response anytime we perceive a threat or danger. Designed to do one and only one thing, helps us survive physical danger. Physiological and emotional limits at which the body functions efficiently and comfortably is referred to as homeostasis. Stress disrupts homeostasis, and after stress, the body returns to homeostasis, right? So let's break down the slide. So first we got fight or flight, right? If you've ever had somebody jump out and scare you, you do one of two things. You either attack them or you run away. Now, again, there's two things that happen in the runaway. There's either you run away or you get so scared that you just freeze up to an extent, right? That a lot of times I've heard that one gets listed sort of with the flight response, even though you didn't flight, because your first reaction after that, once you calm down enough, is to flight. But sometimes people get so overwhelmed they just freeze, right? Sort of like a deer in the headlights, right? And again, there are limits at which our body functions efficiently and comfortably. And again, we call this homeostasis. And any time that a homeostasis is disrupted, it's usually disrupted by some type of stressor. Okay. And then once we deal with that stressor, we return back to that homeostasis. Right? So you're at homeostasis, stress comes, you have fight or flight response. After this, and again, these are extreme bouts of stress, you get through the stress, and then a lot of times what happens is you'll drop below homeostasis and you feel exhaustion, right? You ever gone through a really emotionally exhaustive day, like a very stressful day, and it stresses you, and people say, man, that really stressed me emotionally. I'm tired now, right? And again, you drop below the line, but as you can see, there's a slow return back up to homeostasis after that. Culture connection. So again, the fight or flight, is one response, and then there's this also tend and befriend response that they talk about. So again, female response to stress are characterized by a pattern of tend and befriend rather than fight or flight. This simultaneously maximizes survival of self and offspring. So again, this is a alternative example of you know, where you're in a, again, it's not, it's usually a stressful example of where you don't really have a fight or flight um, option sometimes. Sometimes this does happen during that, but where you try to befriend the person or object or whatever it is that's causing your fight or flight response, the stress, right? So again, men and women have different chemicals in their body. And again, we have different chemicals in our brains. So women respond to stress with brain chemicals that encourage them to bond with other women, build on biobehavioral attachments, caregiving process that depends in part of oxytocin, estrogen, and other sex-linked hormones, may partially explain why women live longer than men. Okay, so again, you know, looking at lesser stresses where somebody might think fight or flight, like either, all right, I'll deal with this or avoid it. Women have this caregiving process that they do, right? And they have biobehavioral attachments and so on and so forth that men a lot of times don't have. Again, you know, these are important. You know, I know in our today's climate of equality, and again, these differences don't equal out to sexes being better or lesser in any regards, and so you got to understand that. But when we talk about science and we talk about the difference of men and women, again, it's not in a better or worse scenario, it's just different. Okay, we are different. We respond differently sometimes to things. Our body responds differently to stress, whether it's physical, emotional. Um, and understanding those things, again, isn't driving a distance between the sexes, but just a better understanding helps us to understand things, you know, like, again, it's one of the things that they look into, maybe why women live longer, right? Is part of their stress response. Okay. So physiological responses to stress, when the stress response is initiated, its immediate and powerful changes come about because of autonomic nervous system. So it's just a reaction. Okay. The two branches of the ANS, sympathetic nervous system, is responsible for initiating the fight or flight response. So your sympathetic system is the one that amps up your heart rate and gets you, you know, pumps the adrenaline, gets you going. Your parasympathetic nervous system is designed to return you back to your homeostasis. So after the whole situation is done, your body can now calm back down. Okay. The hypothalamus, the autonomic nervous system, is controlled by your hypothalamus, located in the diencephalon. Again, one of those words I can't ever say right. Chief region for coordinating sympathetic, parasympathetic activities. The alarm system that delivers a message through the nervous system. And it also delivers a message to your endocrine system to initiate the secretion of hormones. Okay, so you can see all these different things going on. So again, tell sympathetic, parasympathetic activities what they need to do. It's the alarm system that, you know, gets the nervous, you know, like it tells muscles to act, react, so on and so forth. And also your endocrine system to release the necessary hormones needed. Okay, so stress hormones are produced by your adrenal glands. Epinephrine and norepinephrine are released into your bloodstream from your adrenal medulla. Cortisol is released from the adrenal cortex, and your autonomic nervous system will then respond. All right. So here's the effects of stress on the body. Brain becomes more alert. Stress hormones can affect memory and cause neurons to atrophy and die. Headaches, anxiety, depression, disrupted sleep. Digestive system slows down. You can get mouth ulcers or cold sores. we'll do heart first, and then we'll go to the lungs. So heart rate increases and blood pressure rises. Persistently elevated blood pressure and heart rate can increase potential for blood clotting, risk of stroke and heart attack, weakening of the heart muscle, and symptoms that mimic heart attacks. Again, this is looking at constant stress. Going to the lungs, breathing quickens, increased susceptibility to colds, respiratory infections. Your adrenal gland produces stress hormones. Cortisol and other stress hormones can increase central and abdominal fat. Cortisol increases glucose production in liver, causing renal hypertension. Again, it's not that cortisol itself causes that, but cortisol causes you to do things that will then increase, maybe increase your eating habits, decrease your caloric expenditure, so on and so forth. It really, there's a big depends on that section as well as the rest, right? Again, digestive system slows down, which means food and things that are being digested move slower. You get upset stomach. Again, stress can cause skin problems such as eczema and psoriasis. Reproductive system, menstrual disorders in women, impotence and premature ejaculation in men. Muscles tense. You can get muscle twitches and nervous tics. And again, you see some of these are immediate response, some of these are effects of chronic and prolonged, and other possible side effects, right? So again, the different colors tell you which ones are immediate, which ones are due to chronic stress. And so again, stress can have many negative effects on the body, as we can see from this image. And we talked about that stress can have positive effects too, but we're not at that point, okay? So again, fight or flight emergency response is inappropriate in today's social world. In the short term, we need to control our stress response to be effective in our daily life. In long term, we need to keep it under control to avoid the consequences of burnout and poor health. So if you're constantly getting worked up all the time, where you get the fight or flight. Now again, in dangerous situations, you think about like, if you're, like in a situation where, like there's, like you're in war and there's gunfire and things like that, you would think that that's a normal thing, right? Or again, like they said, if you're in the woods and you come up on a bear and the bear stands up and starts growling at you or whatever else, those weren't fight or flight response typically. Now again, what's better than the fight or flight is the ability to manage your stress during even stressful times like that. So again, if you think about our military, right? This is why they go through such extensive training before going out in the field, right? What they're trying to do is they don't want them to have a fight or flight response, because again, if half of them have a fight response and half of them have a flight response, you don't have a platoon of folks that are working cohesively to take care of whatever the problem is that's in front of them, right? So again, they put them through training so that under stressful situations, they don't have a fight or flight, but they're able to then, manage the stress to a point. Again, it's still, they may be in a very stressful situation so that they can work together as a unit to combat what's going on. Same thing when you look at, when somebody gets in a fight. Okay, there's a difference between a trained fighter and somebody that doesn't have any fight experience. So when somebody doesn't have fight experience, again, their fight or flight might take in, and their fighting ability during the fight, again, their adrenaline's pumping, but they're going to have uncoordinated movements. Their heart rate's going to cloud their judgment, and if they're fighting against a trained fighter, the trained fighter is able to actually deal with the stress, hone their senses, use their training, and be able to fight and make decisions that are going to give them a better outcome. Okay, same thing you see with trained athletes, so to speak. So if you have a really good athlete, they're in a stressful point in a game. It's fourth quarter, quarterback throws a ball to them. When they're trained, they have confidence, so on and so forth. They have a better chance of catching the football versus somebody who's, like, man, they haven't played a whole lot. They've got a lot of injuries. They throw this kid in to go try to catch the football. they put a lot of stress and they get a fight or flight. So even if they're like, yeah, I want the ball and I want to catch it, they may be more nervous. Their adrenaline's pumping more. They have less chance of catching the ball, even if they have the desire to do so, because that stress is overwhelming. They're nervous, their hands may be shaky, sweaty, clammy, a lot of things that are going, their coordination is going to be off, a lot of things that are going to set them up for an unsuccessful event versus a successful event. Acute stress helps us generate great strength, focus more clearly, increase our speed, and perform at higher levels, lasts only 30 to 90 seconds, but there are typically few acute threats in everyday life. Right? Most threats we have seem to be more chronic. Again, we can put acute threats in our acute stress. I don't like using threats, but acute stress. So you look at exercise bouts of 30 to 90 seconds would be an acute stress. Women's stress. In similar circumstances that at similar stages of life, women consistently report feeling more stress than men do. And again, we talked about this in one of the earlier chapters. Again, women in general, again, it's not everybody. Some women are closed books, but people typically generate the idea that men are more of a closed book than women. And again, I've met some guys that'll talk about anything and everything, and I've met some women that don't talk about much of their feelings as well either. But when you look at that, they report feelings of more stress, might actually be the fact that they're just more open and honest than men, right? And again, I don't think that's 100% of the explanation, but I think that may add to it a bit as well, right? So again, we may be more similar in this than we think, but there may still be some differences in that, and again, why women might feel more stress versus men, they're again, societal programming, environments, heredity, hormones, and all those things can play into it. Women's stress hormones and blood pressure, unlike those of men, tend to remain elevated at the end of a workday, right? So again, this may, this may be due to the fact, again, I've heard psychologists call this compartmentalization, where men sometimes, they've talked about sometimes that men are sometimes better compartmentalizing aspects of their life. So their work life is their work life, their home life is their home life, their friend life is their friend life, and so on and so forth, where those things may not cross over as much as people that don't compartmentalize, right? So again, that's where you might see this with some of the women they talk about, where their stress hormones don't decrease at the end of the workday, because they don't compartmentalize, where it's like, okay, work is over, this now, right? It floods into everything, right? And again, you can see that in both men and women. Again, I know men who do not compartmentalize, and I know women who do compartmentalize. And so again, those are some things that may play into those differences that we see. Chronic stress. When the stress response stays in the on position longer than necessary to escape danger, nearly all body processes are disrupted. So again, you don't have that time of, where everything drops off, you become exhausted and you can recoup back to homeostasis, right? It's just elevated all the time. So we see things, you physically, you feel, you're going to start to feel some effects. You may be more prone to getting sick. Emotionally, you just are a wreck. Intellectually, you have trouble concentrating. Spiritually, everything feels out of whack. You feel like, you're not completing your purpose. You don't have direction. Socially, you're having trouble connecting with people. There's a lot of things that play into that. Okay. Although stress is not listed among the top 10 causes of death in the United States, it is linked to many illnesses, and stress may not cause problems, but may contribute to the problems. Okay. Most people will not say, okay, stress is causing, but there's things in their life that are disrupting their life that are a stress, right? So again, here's the fight or flight response slide again. So you can see What happens with chronic stress is you don't get that drop down through exhaustion and return to homeostasis, man. You just stay in this elevated stress, right? And again, you may not be in the reaching the fight or flight level, but you're not getting back to homeostasis either, right? So general adaptation syndrome, history of the general adaptation syndrome developed by Hans Sale or Silly, not sure which one, based on observations of physiological response of rats to chronic stress. He theorized that the same pattern of changes occur in the body in reaction to any kind of stress, and that the pattern is what eventually leads to disease condition. Okay, so chronic stress can lead to disease, theoretically. So 3 stages of his general adaptation syndrome. You have the stressor, maybe threatening or exhilarating. The body initial response to stress with change that lower resistance. Resistance of the stressor continues. The body mobilizes to withstand the stress and return to normal. Exhaustion. So again, well, as we go through, you have that. Homeostasis is where we'd like to, let's follow the line down there. So we're going to kind of go off this grid, go back down. So again, you're at homeostasis before the stressor hits, right? And that's where your body likes to maintain stable and consistent balance. So then we're up at resistance. After resistance, we go into exhaustion. So you see that sharp decrease, ongoing extreme stressors eventually depletes the body's resources, so we function at less than normal. Now, if you do not return to homeostasis and you continue to plummet, the body's resources are not replenished and or additional stressors occur, the body suffers breakdowns, right? So you go through illness and eventually can lead to death, right? So again, that's where you look at the things like the hypertension leading to heart attack, stroke, so on and so forth. Okay, now again, this isn't causation equals, correlation equals causation, but again, it's one thing leads to so you have stress, which leads to this, which leads to this, which leads to the heart issue, so on and so forth, right? And again, there may be other stressors involved, there may be other issues involved. You look at heredity, lack of exercise, so on and so forth. Yeah, all those things play into it, okay? So alarm. This is when homeostasis is disrupted, the body systems are activated, and if the stress ceases, homeostasis is then restored. Resistance. If the stressor continues, the body mobilizes its internal resources in effort to return to the state of homeostasis, but because the perception of a threat still exists, the body does not achieve complete homeostasis until that threat is either gone or the body can perceive it as dealt with, right? Exhaustion. If the stress continues long enough, the body can no longer function normally. Organ systems may fail, body breaks down in a variety of ways. And then general adaptation syndrome. As you prepare to take an exam, you experience initial alarm reaction. If you understood the material, study for the exam, and do well, which is eustress, the body will recover and the stress is dissipated. If you're not adequately prepared and fail the exam, you trigger the resistance stage and stay there until the next exam, or until you get the grade and you realize you did okay. If you continue to fail exams, you will eventually enter exhaustive stage. So again, if you're taking your school serious, but you're just you're not prepared, or you can't figure out how to get prepared, and you fail exam after exam after exam, it's just going to add stress after stress after stress that just doesn't go away. The stress response in you. If thinking about your experience of stress, use the FIT formula. So frequency, how often is your stress response triggered? Again, most of my students will know this, except for we usually use 2 T's in our FIT principle, but anyways. So is it happening every day? Is it happening twice a day, 3 times a day? Is it happening twice a week, once a month, those type of things? Intensity, how severe or strong is the stress response when it's triggered? Right? So that's another thing when we talk about the magnitude of it, okay? And then time or duration, how long is the stress response activated, right? Is it a minute, hours, days, so on and so forth? Time tip: when you have a task you dread, start by doing it for just 10 minutes. You can usually convince yourself to work on it for 10 minutes. If you continue past 10 minutes, finish the task, great. If not, take a break, come back and do another 10 minutes later. Right? This helps. Just again, it's one of their little tools. You know, everybody's a little bit different, may work for you, may not. 5 myths about stress. In an ideal world, there would be no stress. Stress is not always bad for us. Again, stress makes things fun. Think about a roller coaster. You know, like as you're climbing up the roller coaster to get to the top before it releases, it's stressful, right? You see the cart climbing up and up and higher and higher and higher. The anticipation's part of the fun, right? It's kind of the fun of when you go on dates. You know, you really don't know how it's going to play out, right? It's kind of fun to see how things play out. You know, when somebody, you know, you think about Christmas and things like that. When you exchange gifts, you don't know what the gift is. You know, and that's kind of the fun of it, right? But it's a stress. You know, as well as like when we think of exercise, it's a stress, right? And it's a good stress. What is stressful to me is stressful to you. Not necessarily, right? Some, again, go back to the roller coaster. Some people hate roller coasters. You know, I love roller coasters. I think they're awesome. They're fun. You know, some people, you know, they go on them because people pressure them to go on them. They hate them, you know, everything about them, right? They don't like to do it. Only unpleasant situations are stressful. Again, you know, we talked about like you're going on a date, right? You know, so the it's you know, it's different, right? You're going on a date with a new person. This new person is different than somebody else you dated. There's a stress to that, you know. And again, you know, if you're there can be hope to it as well, right? You know, you're hoping this is a person that you're going to enjoy your time with. You know, maybe you're hoping this is a person you're going to marry. Maybe, you know, so again, it's a change, it's new. It also can be stressful because you think, man, maybe this date's going to be horrible, or maybe I'm going to really like them and they won't like me, or maybe, you know, they're going to like me and bug me and I don't like them. You know, there's a lot of unknowns, right? So there's this unknown, this change that's going on. But again, it can be good, right? It doesn't have to be negative. It can be positive. No symptoms, no stress. Camouflaging symptoms with medications, other drugs, or alcohol may deprive you of the signals you need to begin reducing physiological and psychological stress. Just because you're using things to try to avoid it or pretend it's not there doesn't mean it's not there. And stress is inevitable, so you can't do anything about it. So stress is inevitable. There will always be stressors. So the first part has truth, but the second part is the false, right? This is the lie. You can learn specific techniques that not only help you cope with stress, but actually prevent some stress from ever happening. And again, what that means, you know, I think they a little overstep a bit. So there can be a stressor, but you can view it differently to where it's not necessarily a stress, so to speak. I mean, it's there, but you manage it. It's, you know, it's really more of you manage it, right? So again, there's certain things that you know how to do, right? So if you're one of those people, you know, you think about every morning, if you're a breakfast eater, every morning you're going to eat breakfast, you know, like I eat breakfast and drink coffee, right? Well, the breakfast isn't going to make itself, nor is the coffee going to pour itself. I have to do that. So that's something that I'm going to have to do. It takes, now again, do I view it as a stress? No. Do I worry about it? No. Do I have the food at my house so it's there? Yes. Right. Now the first time I ever made coffee, or the first time I ever made, you know, a breakfast or something like that, might have been more stressful because I'm like, man, do I know how to put the right amount of coffee and work the coffee maker and all those other things? But the more times I've done it, it's not that the stress has gone away because I make coffee every single day. You know, it's just I don't view it necessarily as a stress, right? The same event happens. I don't see it necessarily as a stress anymore, right? So the event's still there, okay? So conclusion, your body is designed to respond to acute stress in a predictable manner for one outcome, right? Your survival in today's world, many of our challenges are not acute. physical challenges as before. Sometimes they can be social challenges or emotional challenges, intellectual challenges, so on and so forth. And again, more stress nowadays tends or seems to be more chronic than acute. Most of our stressors are primarily psychological and social, and the stress response is not well suited to deal with these type of stressors. Okay, and so when we look at the fight or flight, it's not really meant for those, right? It's meant for avoiding physical harm or combating physical harm, however you look at it, right? Again, we won't do this lab. This is not one of the labs we'll do. I'll post things on the Blackboard site for your assignments and labs, but again, they just have these at the end of each lecture for more of ideas of what you'd like to do. And again, this won't be one that you guys need to worry about, okay? Or this one. All right. So that's it for chapter 3. If you have questions, please email me, text me, send me a message on Blackboard, and I will answer those. And we'll do the live session here on Wednesday. And see you then.